Happy Easter, everyone. For those that celebrate, Andrew here. I have a brief message to share with you, and this is just going to be a short reading of an excerpt from a book called The Externalization of the Hierarchy. That's by Alice Bailey, dictated to her by her teacher or a spiritual teacher during the years of the Second World War. And I find the uh, excerpt that I'm going to share, three short paragraphs, to be timely, very poignant today, given the status of the world. And I think people will see the relevance to what's going on. So I hope that this is helpful to some of you. And for those who are not familiar, this is the writings of Alice Bailey, although she is not the originator of these particular teachings. She is the amanuensis, and she writes them down. Another time, I'll make a short video about channeling and the great differences between what we call channeling today. A lot of times it's trance channeling, such as Edgar Casey, the sleeping prophet, did, and what people like Alice Bailey, H.P. Blavatsky, others did, Helena Rarick. These are conscious. I don't even like the word mediums because at no point does the person or the disciples' will or their own thinking and their own consciousness cease. At no point are they taken over or unaware of what's going on. And in the very highest grades of spiritual mediumship, which we do today, some people call it channeling, what's going on is that the person essentially is stepping aside from their own personality thoughts and ambitions and all of the, oh, most of what we call ourself, our drives, our desires, and so forth. And you're letting, first and foremost, effectively your own soul, your higher power, call it the Christ within. That's what St. Paul called it, Christ in you, the hope of glory. Others would call it Buddha nature. And there are other terminologies, but that's what you're letting take charge. That's what you're effectively putting in control. You're not divining because you're not using an external means. Of course, prayer and meditation are inherent in this. Absolute mindfulness, or otherwise, how do you know who's stepping in? And that's an important conversation for those who do know. And I'm being very clear here. You'll find that the highest grades of mediumship, or what people do call channeling, is just that. There's another, if you will, entity, another individual, another soul who is expressing. However, when that's originating not in the astral plane, not in the lower mental plane, nowhere in your personal ego, and in fact, even your own soul is essentially connecting you with, linking you up with teachers, guides, higher power, and essentially, plugging us in naturally to the network that binds us all together. Well, lo and behold, who's to say just what the limitations are? I'm not sure I know of any, because even far transcendent of our world teacher or the Christ, known by different names in all the world's faiths. There's the Imam Mahdi, Kalki Avatarya, the Saoshyant, Moshiach or Messiah. Every single tradition has a name for this world teacher who many of us are looking for, and some have for the past few decades, others for the past few centuries or millennia. You know, it's biblical, right? Lo, I am with you unto the end of the era. Well, many forms of reckoning would place that in the year 1899 and 1900. Others can point to, in these very teachings that I'm going to be quoting from, a statement that I find helpful, and that is just a point of fact, or point blank mention that the Christ assumed the official mantle or aegis of the Aquarian era in, I think, the year 1945, basically with the close of the Second World War. And again, the teaching I'm about to quote from, called Externalization of the Hierarchy, that's from just years before that had taken place. But it's poignant right to the moment, I would say. So see if you understand my purposes for sharing this. And, I'll come back and maybe say some more later about some of the things that this is all just by way of segue. Maybe I'll put it in the wherever I share this video. I'll say, you can skip to a few minutes in, but this is what I wanted to share. So I'm going to read that now. Again, this is the Tibetan teacher or the Tibetan master Tuol Kul. He's um, sharing this well, 19 early 40s, while the Second World War rages on. He says, thought, desire, activity. Such is the history of human vision and dream. Down the ages, from the very night of time, man has dreamed, expectant of divine revelation and of divine intervention. When all else seems to fail, men look to God. Again and again in the history of the race, the vision has taken form, and the dream has materialized upon the wings of powerful desire and demand. Again and again, God has revealed and sent his messengers and representatives to aid and guide humanity. But this happens only when the demand is adequately voiced and the need has cried to high heaven. Never yet has the response failed. Again and again lately, the nations of the world have been called to prayer, and this proclaimed appeal of millions can be disregarded. I'm sorry, cannot, let's get that right, be disregarded or remain negligible. An answer must be forthcoming, though it may not take the same form as of old, because man is today, in spite of appearances, more capable of handling his own affairs and determining consciously his own events. No matter how unrealized, back of all these demands and prayers in the many Christian countries lies a subtle, deep-seated conviction that the return of Christ is imminent. There is widespread acceptance of the concept that the presence of the Son of God can be evoked and that he must come to the assistance of his people. No matter what the dogmatic interpretation or the theological idealism, some form of this belief lies behind the cry of the millions. Will this demand from the hearts of men induce the return of the Christ of Galilee? Will it bring about the emergence into manifestation of some great Son of God who will embody perhaps another and unknown aspect of God's life and quality? Will it perhaps produce the embodiment of another divine revelation? And just as the Buddha expressed the wisdom of God and Christ revealed to us the love of God, is it not possible that he who may come will unfold to us the nature of the will or purpose of God, thus presenting that will to good which must be called into activity if the evil will to power is to be swept from the earth? I present this possibility to your attention and would ask you to think about it. Thus, if this should prove the correct result of all invocation and prayer, we shall have the balancing of the personality will, of material selfishness and acquisitiveness, and the selfless will, which seeks to aid the whole of humanity, the will of the lower self and the will of the self or soul will be brought into conflict with each other, with humanity throwing the weight of its influence upon one side or the other. When I speak of the weight of human influence upon one side or another, I refer not alone to thought power and to what so many euphemistically call work on mental levels. I refer to the conscious activity of the whole man working mentally, emotionally, that's astrally. Another word for that is astrally or emotionally, and most emphatically, physically also. Sounds kind of like St. Paul, doesn't it? Only those, therefore, who are integrated personalities can work in this manner. And herein lies a difficulty. Those people today who work only mentally, or who sit and send thoughts of love broadcast into the world, and who bask thus in the beauty of their own idealism, making frequently no adequate balancing physical effort to bring this present evil situation to an end through right choice, sacrifice, and strenuous service, are in reality of no service at all to any except themselves. There are those who send thoughts of love to the group of evil men who are responsible for world disaster, believing thereby to influence them for good. I would remind them that love is essentially an impersonal potency or energy, dependent for its effect upon the type of form which it contacts and upon which it makes an impact. Pouring, therefore, upon the selfish, materialistic nature, it will only enhance desire and promote increased acquisitive aggression, and thus foster the lower nature and distort the true expression of love, leading to increased evil activity. Pouring upon the selfless, and I would say, have we not seen this? Do we not witness this now? Pouring upon the selfless, the pure, and the disinterested, it will foster reality and true love. These are points which should be remembered at this time by the well-intentioned but occultly ignorant server. In other words, the esoterically ignorant.